Hey guys, and welcome back to the INSITE channel. My name is Freddie or Grimiana, and today we have Vorborg in the Crosshair. After taking over the world with Copenhagen Flames, Daniel sought out a bit of a new challenge in the form of EG. This project has had a lot of scrutiny, but is it actually warranted? And that would be definitely the center of the conversation we have for today. But before we go any further, I just want to ask, how are you doing? Are you enjoying the player break? Is everything okay?
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, I have a lot of time now, so I'm trying just to focus on other stuff. Focus on my health. Try to get in better shape. I don't. Whenever the player break comes around, I enjoy it for the first week. I went to the Amazon rainforest with my girlfriend. That was very nice.
That's
But
really cool.
at this point, I'm just super bored and just can't wait to get back to work. Honestly.
I understand that. I think everyone I've spoken to has kind of been in the same, they're like, oh, it's nice that we're having a break, but 2 weeks is a long time, weirdly enough. But before we get into the conversation about EG, I do want to talk a little bit about Copenhagen Flames in general, because you were a part of that organization for a long time, not only as a coach, but also you had other roles within the organization at multiple different times as well. And you had loads of success towards the end with the back-to-back major runs alongside other tournaments. But before we talk about the majors itself, when you were part of the organization, what role did you have previously before you became a coach? And why? What was the reason for you then transitioning over to the coach role?
Yeah, so I mean, I was a co-owner. Me and the CEO Stefan were the two majority owners when I joined. We sold some of the company after a bit to investors, but I was still a part owner. And then my primary role was director of esports, we call it, but like a GM of sorts, and in charge of every esport team we had. Figure out what games are we gonna be in, who are we gonna put in charge as coaches, as players. What are the esport divisions gonna look like? That was my primary role. But when I joined Copenhagen Flames, we were very very small. We had $30,000 yearly budget for everything in the operations. So we didn't have a lot of employees. So it was a little bit of everything. I think, Stefan, the CEO, he had Twitter, then I did Facebook or something like that. So we were also like the SoMe managers. We were you were just doing everything because it was just such a small business, right? And then the business grew, and it got bigger and bigger. We got more and more employees, so I could start focusing more and more on just getting the teams to perform. And Counter Strike was our biggest investment compared to a lot of the other teams out there. It was still small salaries that we were running with, but for us, it was our biggest investment. So I started spending more and more time on Counter Strike to make sure that we were successful in Counter Strike. And basically, from when we entered Counter Strike, I wasn't there for practices the first 5 months, but 4 or 5 months. But then from then on out, I was actually there for every single practice, every single official game, every single LAN we ever went to. I was there just to make sure it ran smoothly. And my background before Flames was I was both a manager, a GM, but towards the end, a coach in League of Legends. So I already had coaching capabilities in terms of setting goals, leading discussions, managing egos, making sure we're all pulling in the same direction, all that stuff that you also have to do as a coach outside of the in-game rated stuff. So I did that for the team for, I don't know, 4 years, I think. And with a small budget, also comes less capabilities of getting good coaches. And we struggled a lot with getting the right coaches. And finally, when I went full-time coach towards the end, we were looking at the candidates we had available to us, and it was a conversation together with the team. We're actually, Copenhagen Flames as a business is big enough now that I can actually drop all my other responsibilities and have capable people pick up on those responsibilities. So there is an option for me to go full-time coaching, and together with the team, we decided that was the best course forward. So I was head coaching, I think, for the last 6 months or something, but I was putting in 60 hours of Counter Strike regardless every single week. I just did 30 hours a week on top of that, running the business before that.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff to do. But so do you feel because as you're saying, you came over from a League of Legends coach, do you feel like you bring actually more to the table than some other coaches? Because would it be fair to say when you first started coaching, you might not be in the best like analytical mind because you had just been coaching League of Legends, but then you bring more of like what a coach may provide, as you were saying, like managing egos. Like, do you find that sign that you actually excel at now because of your past experience?
Yeah, I mean, when I work with we had long periods of time Copenhagen Flames where we didn't have a coach for Counter Strike. We were just, I mean, I was there, but we didn't view me as a coach because I mean, when I started working with the team, I knew nothing. I was about to swear, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear.
You're allowed, so you're allowed to say.
But
Don't worry.
okay, okay. Well, in that case, I didn't know jack shit about Counter Strike. I started working with the team. I had played Counter Strike as a kid, you know, pool party stuff like that, you know, just
Yeah.
run around 1.6. But playing the game professionally, I knew nothing, so I didn't pretend that I knew anything about the game. But it's just I find myself to be a very like logical mind. I understand logic and I apply logic to everything I do in my life. And if our in-game leader is explaining to another player on the team like why we're doing things in a certain way, I know if it makes sense logically, and I can, if they go on for like 20 minutes or something, I can poke holes if there's holes in the logic being applied along the way, right? So that was kind of my job. It's just like make sure we're consistent in how we're applying our logic, make sure we do it in the same fashion, make sure everyone understands the logic we're trying to apply, so we all understand how we're trying to play Counter Strike. So like those were the kind of things I was doing before I knew anything about Counter Strike, and I got like good feedback as we went along with the players. You know, they thought I was asking good questions, the right questions, called people out on their bullshit, made sure people gave it their all, good efforts, goals, all that stuff, right? And then as you go along, again, like being there for every single practice, every single VOD review, like you just pick up stuff, right? Like it's impossible not to start knowing stuff about Counter Strike. And I, of course, worked with Hooksy for a long time. I worked with ESEA. We had in the beginning we worked with Psychro, with Console, who had also won like Copenhagen Games and stuff like that. So, you know, like you got some players in that at the time had way more experience than what we had in Copenhagen Flames. So you just pick up stuff from different people, right? And then towards the end, well, we had played in majors, we had played in IM Katowice, and like, and our team had to do that progression kind of like naturally. No one, it's not that we got like players really in that knew just like a ton more than everyone else. So it was a natural progression. I was like part of that natural progression, even though I wasn't like a driving factor in the Counter Strike department. Like at the same time, Ayabi or Siphon was learning how to play good Counter Strike. Even though I wasn't a player, like I was also learning at the same time.
You were
That
with
kind of
them,
makes sense,
yeah.
like how to play Counter Strike, right? Yeah, because I was there every step of the way, right? So, and then obviously when I then went full time head coach, that freed up those extra like 35 hours or whatever to just like grind demos, make sure you're up to date on the meta, and if there's topics that you don't feel that confident in, then you know start spending time getting more confident in it and stuff like that, right? So that's the progression I guess I was going through. But my strengths, still probably, but especially in the beginning, is all the other stuff that isn't necessarily in-game related. But now this day I feel very confident in my in-game knowledge as well. When it comes to like rotations, strategies, how to play off your teammates, like theory behind the game. There are still a couple of topics that I would say there are people out there that are way better than I am. And that's like all the micro details, crosshair placement, how to peek an angle, all that stuff, because I never really played the game. I mean, still to this day, I would probably struggle to like get global because I don't play the game. I watch the game a ton. I think about the game a ton. I talk about the game a ton, but I don't play the game. So all those like small details that you only really notice when you're playing the game, those are definitely not something I'm very strong at.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to be literally good at everything. But do you think it'd be fair to say then that like you are almost in a way like still learning in that manner, and like you almost haven't like reached your full potential then yet because you are still like getting to a stage where you're like 100% on the knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I hope every coach sees it that way. I think if a coach
Yeah,
knows
okay,
everything,
that's true. Yeah.
then he's probably gonna fall off. But I mean, yeah, I mean, the year I just had in EG, obviously wildly unsuccessful result wise, but I feel like I learned so much these past 10 months. Because we can get more into that later. But like, we had one way of playing the game and one way of viewing the game in Copenhagen Flames that we had built together. So I knew how to succeed doing that. But in Evil Geniuses, I've been exposed to so many different ways to like viewing the game, and I spent a lot of time because we didn't have success. So I probably spent more time like looking at other teams and really thinking about how do they have success and how do they achieve the results that they have, right? And like go in depth with that. So like I feel like I'm a way more versatile coach today than I was a year ago.
I mean, again, taking the positives out of something that maybe not be like too great. But so one thing I do want to ask about is that we're in a big atmosphere right now where it's like poach or be poached, and it's something I spoke to Manx a little bit about, and Snappy as well for that matter. Did it make it like difficult to build a roster in Copenhagen Flames because you kind of like almost always worried about being poached, and then going to EG, like because you were a partner team, did it just actually reduce that worry and know that you could work on stuff for a little bit longer?
Yeah, but definitely a big difference. I think in the time I was in Copenhagen Flames, I think we sold 17 players, and so it wasn't really.
That's a
Yeah, it
lot.
was bad, and we were like worried about people getting poached. That was just like reality, like we did. It was just like, yeah, I mean, that's happened, that's a part of life being where we are. And even though like most people of course know us from the majors, but I think like almost something I'm almost just as proud of is like we kept a consistent level, and like we got to go to Flashpoint. We qualified for like international lands, and we were like performing around top 30, even though we were selling a player. We had a period of time where we were selling a player every 2 months or something, like every 6-7 weeks. But we kept like keeping up with the results and went to the first RMR and all that stuff, right? So, I've been through a lot of like roster building and all that stuff, and people getting poached was just a part of life. But like that was ultimately why I left Copenhagen Flames, was because I knew all 5 players were gonna leave the organization, and I felt like over a long time I had proven that I could get a lot out of not so much budget wise. So the idea was to go to a place, organization with more resources, so I could build a championship winning team. And EG was in a period where the discussions we had before I signed was that they were probably gonna have somewhat of a rebuild. The idea was kind of to see which of the players that were on the team currently that we could build around, or if we couldn't build around any of them. Of course, I mean, maybe all 5, maybe 0, it was just like up in the air. And with the resource that EG had in terms of, like salary they can offer and buyouts they can pay for, and having both partner slots, right? It was like, I mean, I felt like it was the perfect place to like try and build something, right? And then the partner slots take pressure away in terms of, like, I guess having to qualify, and obviously players want to stay in the partner teams, but it added a different kind of pressure, especially when we had so young and inexperienced players. Because it's like, we this team was put together. I was the last piece to join, so I didn't have much to say in like who was on the team. But Nealon coming in as a young IGL, we had Hex being promoted, and then Zerg and Breeze kind of had to like reinvent themselves because they had automatic to some extent to come back from Valorant, but obviously EG not winning a whole lot, right? But then the team comes together, new IGL, new coach, and then you have 10 days of practice, and then first game is against the best team in the world, like you're facing rank 1. And then then that's hard to perform, right? So if you don't do well in that first tournament, then again, you're facing like the best teams in the world in the blast groups, then you're off to a rocky start, right? Then you have like, I can't even remember, I think it's like 5 practice days, right? And then you're going into EPL or something, right? And if you don't perform there, then okay, well, now everyone's judging you, and there's even more pressure, right? But you had 14 practice days, so it's a different kind of pressure where every time we were thinking about making roster moves in the off season, it's like, well, if we take young guys in, which for different reasons was like the only thing that we ended up being able to do while I was there, it's again like, okay, they get like 9 days of practice with the team, and then they have to play against the best in the world. So that's like a different type of pressure that you have to deal with, where in Copenhagen Flames, like we make a roster change. Okay, if we don't perform for the first month, like no one cares and no one gives a fuck, right? Like we can take 6 months to build if we want to. But when you're in EG, we can't take 3 months to build, because if there is not results tomorrow, then there's going to be a ton of pressure, and the other partner teams are going to be like, why is EG a partner team? They're doing terribly, like all that stuff, right? So there's other kinds of pressure when you're like a partner team, and you have to play in every blast and every EPL and all that stuff. So it's different.
Is it possible then to, because I guess like you guys, is it even possible then to promote one of these younger players, give them experience, because you don't have any time to practice? Like I said, like there's no time to practice. Like, is it even possible to make these type of decisions to promote someone? Like, does that absolutely like hinder your like range of who you can pick up? Then does that hinder it by so much?
I think it is definitely possible to promote, but you need to have a stable team already. The
Yeah.
issue we had is that we didn't have a stable team. We didn't have like a roster composition that made sense, that were on the same page, that like we were never stable. And when you aren't a stable team and then you pull up a rookie, he's going into a team that's still figuring stuff out, so you can't just give him a clear direction of how to perform or how to fit in. And on top of that, he gets 10 days of practice and then he's playing in the best team in the world. For example, let's take Wiz. He got promoted, right? And he had 10 days of practice before we played against Heroic. That was his first game. Heroic was the number one ranked team in the world, right? And he was thrown into a team where we didn't have our shit figured out. We were still figuring stuff out. We were still figuring out how to play the game and how to play with each other. So it's a super hard situation for him to be in. And that's why when a lot of people were giving us criticism, like, why haven't you promoted George yet? Why haven't you promoted this guy yet? It was like, well, like when we're already a super unstable team, it's not going to help us much to just like promote another academy player, because it's so hard for them to like go up into that environment and perform from day one, because like we needed that like stable core first, and obviously it's on me to make sure we had that, and we never really achieved that, right? So that's why like maybe someone like George, maybe he did deserve a shot, but he didn't get it. But that's why in the end refrezh was pulled in, because he's a veteran player. He's been top 5 for like a year and a half straight with Heroic. He's been on IGL for a little bit. He's qualified for, I don't know, like 4 majors in a row or something. We pulled him, right? So that's why a guy like refrezh got pulled in and not like George or whoever else, right? So I'm a little sad we never really got to get together like a core that and this isn't to like throw shade at any of the players. Like I tried to convey this on my Twitter and in the HLTV interview I did. Like I truly do believe that all the players that was involved in the EG project while I was there, I do believe that they can all have success in like high level of Counter-Strike. But the combination of players that we had didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so I think ideally we should have made some different roster moves. And I mean, I understood why the roster moves that were made. They were different. I mean, esport has been financially, for like, you see so many orgs like cutting down, right? Like academy teams are being cut, players are being cut, salary budgets are being downgraded, entire organization is like firing employees left, right, and center. And it's also, of course, about like who was available to EG. Like we can't get the best players in the world if we rank like 40 or whatever, right? So there's a lot of reasons why it wasn't possible to do. So I don't blame EG like too much about the situation. And I think here there's a lot of rumors in the offseason, right? I think they did try and change things up for this upcoming split. But we never really got that like stable core where it just made sense. So and it felt eternally like we were getting close. We had some really good periods of practice where we thought we're hitting our stride, but then different stuff happened, and apparently we weren't on the same page afterwards. And then again, you have like 4 days of practice to fix that, and then we weren't able to fix that in 4 days. You go straight into the next tournament, you lose that. Confidence goes lower. You have 3 days of practice to fix that. We didn't get it fixed in 3 days. You lose again. Confidence goes down. You have 2 days of practice to fix it before the next tournament, and then we just never recovered. So yeah.
Like I really don't think people realize how busy the schedules get. Like it is kind of ridiculous, and especially trying to organize interviews, I've realized that with how like it's like, yeah, sorry, I can't do them in this country. Oh, I'm in this country next week. I'm in this country next week. I'm like, Jesus. But the point you made there about is composition is also a point you made in the HLTV interview. There's a few parts to this question about the composition. Firstly, if you were okay with, can you actually just break down like what you saw was like wasn't working with the composition, and then also with bringing in some of the new players that you try to fix the composition, did you have much of a say of that? Or was that maybe more like the organization, like was it their decision, or were you more hands-on with that?
Yeah, I mean, if we start with the first roster composition I was a part of, it was Nealon, Automatic, Breeze, Cirque, and Hext. And Nealon was a young, at the level that we wanted to compete at, inexperienced IGL, playing all these tier 1 events over and over.
Yeah,
He did play a major before, but wasn't, of course, used to playing in all the big tournaments. So, and
consistent.
I think he came into the team a little laid back, maybe, because he came into the team. It's like, okay, Automatic, major winner, Breeze, Cirque, won like ESL 1 New York, been number 1 in the world, so he was kind of like looking at, okay, so how do these guys want to play Counter-Strike? And maybe it didn't like take full charges in IGL, which, I can understand, like I get where he's coming from, right? But then we had Automatic, which I do think tried to bring a lot. I think like most of our playstyle came from how he saw the game and how he wanted to play, put in a ton of work. I think Cirque was in a period of time where he did try and like talk. I think he was a little bit inconsistent, but he was in like a rough patch where he was trying so many different things to like find himself, because he had a hard time finding success for a long time, right? So you kind of start to second guess everything you're doing. So I think he had a hard time adding a lot to the team when it comes to the big picture stuff. And Breeze, to me, is like, Breeze, I honestly still believe that tomorrow he could be on like a top 5 team in the world too. But he's the 5th guy on the team, in my opinion. He's like, if you have a really strong core, you have 4 players that like shape the team, then Breeze is like a guy you plug in and he's just gonna destroy people. He's not the guy that's gonna come in and be like, hey guys, I think we should play like this, this, and this. But if you just put him in good situations, like, he'll deliver and he'll perform. Sadly, though, we weren't able to put him in a lot of great positions, so as a result, his performance also lacked thereof, right? And obviously, then we had Hext, who was a rookie, so I didn't really expect him to like come in and be a big part of like how we shape our game and stuff like that, right? So I think we only really had like Automatic, that like 1 out of 5 players that did what is like quote unquote like baseline or more that expected for a person in their role in terms of adding to the overall team play style, and like like show up to a practice day and have a ton of things you want to do and have opinions on how we're playing the game, how we're approaching situations. And on top of that, I also came from an environment in Copenhagen Flames where it was like super collaborative and it was very much reliant on everyone giving their opinion. So I mean, I like, for example, like Malik was the coach before I was the coach in EG, and he's also working again with the team. And I also told Valence, who's in charge of the CS division, that Malik would probably have been a way better coach for that roster. So I'm not like, it's not only about the like team composition with the players, it's just as much like the composition with me as a coach. Because I came from like, hey, my job is, I also have an opinion on how we should play Counter-Strike, but it's also very much about like combining what all the players think and then make sure it makes sense. Whereas it would have been way better in this team that we had if I was the type of coach that would just like, hey, this is how we do shit. This is the play style. These are the strats. This is the way we're going to be playing Counter-Strike. This is the philosophy. Everyone just like follow this line of direction and we're going to be great. But that didn't like come natural to me either at the time. So it was like lack of direction, lack of initiative, lack of ownership, lack of leadership, like whatever kind of terms you want to put on it. And I think we struggled with that for a while, but we still did okay in like the first 3-4 months of the team. We made it to the major. I think we basically won all the games that we were quote unquote supposed to win outside of 9C at the major, but like we beat Eternal Fire at EPL, we beat Movistar at EPL, we beat IHC at the major, beat all the North American teams and all the qualifiers. That wasn't like Liquid. And then we beat Fury in one game. So it was fine, but it didn't feel like good. It didn't feel controlled when we played, it was more so, it was a little messy. And then in winter, we were like looking at, okay, what changes can we make to get a team composition that maybe makes a bit more sense. But yeah, then when it comes to roster composition, I gave my opinion. I was talking with Valence but Valens was ultimately in charge of how the lineup should look, and who was going to be on the team, who was going to be benched, brought in, whatever, right? I mean, I did feel listened to, but we didn't necessarily like agree on the optimal solutions. And when we didn't agree on optimal solutions, then we went with what Valens thought was the right choice. So we got in Wiz instead of Cirque. That was the only change that ended up being available at the time. And we didn't expect that to like fix our core issues, because again, like bringing in a rookie is not going to fix lack of leadership, initiative, whatever, right? It was more so like a Cirque had issues finding his level. Obviously academy players, it's like, okay, we weren't getting the full potential out of Cirque. Let's get a young player in, and we'll see if we can get the full potential out of him. We might not, but then we might be in a similar situation we're in before, or we might hit the jackpot with a young guy that's like gonna find his groove, right? So I did say at the time that I thought that we would probably be slightly worse short term with the change, just because Cirque did talk and he was like communicative, but bringing a rookie, I thought we were gonna lose a little bit of that. But I was like okay with that change, because I did think, and I still do think, that Wiz has a lot of potential. But again, it's like tough conditions that he had to perform under. Yeah, ultimately we didn't succeed with getting the most out of him either. So the same kind of roster issues persisted. I think towards the end, though, just quickly, I think Nealon, like the last 3 months we had the team, I think Nealon stepped up massively. And I also feel like like in terms of, it's not that I think like Nealon did poorly before that. Like I don't think he's like a bad player or that he did bad. But in terms of like being a leader and being the guy that's like setting the direction, he did a lot more of that in the last couple of months in the team. And I think I am way more capable of doing it too. And we got refrezh in that also brought like a ton of ideas. So I think we were on our way to like fix that issue, but the issues that we had then in the last lineup that we had like for 2 months or whatever with refrezh was more so that now we started to have a lot of opinions, which I think is a good thing. But then it takes time to like mesh them together and figure out the play style and all that kind of stuff, right? And then on top of that, we only had like 14 days of practice with refrezh on low ping, I think, before IEM Dallas, just because of like these stuff and stuff like that, right? So refrezh was practicing. We were practicing North America, and refrezh was practicing like 130 ping, and that kind of changes how you can practice as well. Practicing North America isn't like optimally either with their opponents and how much you can practice and stuff like that. So I think we showed some decent things at IEM Dallas. We had like a close BO1 against FaZe. Then we had one fairly good map against Complexity we should have won, and then we lost big on Anubis against Complexity, but honestly, then people can look at that and be like, yeah, like, see, they still suck. But from my perspective, it was like they hit B on us like 10 times that half, and they hit it on a timing that we had never encountered in practice. So we didn't know how to like deal with that, and then you just lose the entire game because of that. And as a new team, I say like new team because obviously it was only refrezh coming in, right? But refrezh, for example, was playing B on Anubis. Sometimes you have to go through that. Like sometimes you play against a team and official that does something you've never faced in practice, and then you lose, and that's like that's a part of life, right? So I feel like we were heading somewhat in the right direction towards the end, but obviously we didn't get a whole lot of time to work with it. But we were probably still like a change away from having like a super good team, in my opinion.
Okay, so because it's an interesting one about refrezh. Just like what we're talking about him there is that like, understandably you are bringing him in because of experience, but from my perspective, and feel completely free to like reject this if you think this is the case, but it's like I do see refrezh as a player who's reinventing himself with the past 6 months and trying to find his footing. Was this maybe like a little bit of a problem for you guys, that like he was experienced, but he's also like changing his experience in a sense?
He definitely, like, he was an IGL in Sprout for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Then going back to not being an IGL is definitely a transition. But there were some things that he needed to like change, and where we're like, okay, like you're not an IGL anymore, so let's
Stop calling.
adjust these things, right? But yeah, I mean, like we wanted him to say stuff, right? But it's about like being that secondary core and that lurk. But honestly, I feel like people look at refrezh stats at EG now and they go, you know, like he's so bad. He's like he's done for. He's washed up. But it's like most of his. I think most of his official registered maps on HLTV is on 130 ping. So that's
The
like
American Cash Cups. Like it was the American Cash
yes,
Cups. He was
yeah.
like it was like random
playing a
games.
qualifier for Games
Yeah.
8 or something.
Mm.
Yeah. So remember that's like 130 ping. And then even the games he get to play with low ping, remember then that he's been practicing on 130 ping, which completely changes how you peak angles. It like you're just not feeling the same level of confidence going into duels, and like it completely messes with how you play. So it's he didn't have very good like circumstances to perform. I still believe that refrezh is a very good player. I think he's a super smart player. I think in the right systems he's still good enough to play at least in like top 15 in the world and quite possibly higher. But I feel like it's so unfair to judge him on anything that happened in EG just because of like the circumstances were absolutely horrible for him to perform.
Yeah, and also such a short period of time, it's like 2 months. But for you, with your experience, so something we were talking about with Copenhagen Flames is that you were saying how like you're so used to like rebuilding every single 2 months that you were constantly having to adapt. Was it like a new challenge for you when you're not having to rebuild? You've just got the set 5 in front of you, and you have to sort out these issues. Like, is that one of potentially the main things that has like helped you adapt in the last year?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, there was still ideas at EG that we were gonna rebuild. I do think that's one of my strengths too, like building a solid 5 that like on the same page, etc. Right? But again, for different reasons, that wasn't possible to have happen in the time was an EG. But like yeah, we had to work through our differences, right? Had so many conversations, like I've been on calls in the off. Like I think me and Neelan spent like 40 hours in the off season just like talking about like big picture Counter Strike. And me and Automatic would sometimes like just jump on a call. We were supposed to talk about one thing for an hour. I think one time we talked for 9 hours straight about like just like constantly. It was just like, you know, just an off day, like a small conversation. Can we just like talk about this thing, right? But then we just ended up talking so much about, okay, so how do you use this? How do you use this? So if this happens, what do you think about this? And, you know, just like getting that like understanding. And we came from very different backgrounds, and like still to this day, for example, me and Neelan or me and Automatic, I think those are probably the guys I spend the most time talking to about the game. There's still things that we like disagree on in terms of like how you best build a team or how you best play Counter-Strike or whatever, right? But it was never like hostile or whatever, but it was always about just like learning from each other, understanding, oh, so you mean this, oh, you think that way. Okay, well then let's like try to find a compromise, and let's, you know, try to find common ground and work on that. So through all of those conversations and being exposed to all these different ways of thinking about the game, that's definitely like taught me as well to do things differently. And I can see I probably still have a preference towards some of the ways we did stuff in Copenhagen Flames in terms of playing the game, but I'm open to and I'm fine with doing things way differently because I can see how that can work and how a team can be successful playing with different styles and doing things in a different way. So I definitely think that has like made me more versatile and made me even more aware of how to use different type of players in a team.
Yeah, and then so speaking about like those different methods, you obviously have explained some of them with Copenhagen Flames. Like everyone talks about everything, and that's like one way to view the game and one way how to play it. And then with EG, you were saying it's a little bit more like one person takes the reins. Are there any other differences you viewed coming from the two teams, where it either be like outside the server with how you philosophically view the game, or like actually like playing the game? Like, was there maybe like a regional difference that you maybe like that's you still?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a regional thing, but I mean we definitely viewed the game way differently. I think in EG we had a way more like clear idea of what we were gonna do in the round before we started playing the round. And honestly, when I watch a lot of top teams, that's probably how most of the top teams play. When I watch demos of a lot of teams, it's very clear that they have an idea. Like, if you watch the demo and you know Counter-Strike, you watch the first 15, 20 seconds of the demo, you already know if they're going to go A or B. Or at least like their plan A is to go either like A or B. You can kind of see what the idea is behind what they're doing. In Copenhagen Flames, we had that sometimes, but that was more so as a counter to specific playstyles. But our ideal way of playing the game was going into the round and have, this sounds bad, but not have a clue about if we're going A or B, because it was like everyone kind of having the mentality of we were kind of spread out most of the rounds we played, and then we could spread out in different ways depending on how the opponents were playing, and if people had ideas of how to get an opening kill, they wanted some resources. One guy could come and help with some resources then, but the mindset was very much like everyone goes out to your spot and you get as much space as you can. And then like how much space you can get, sometimes that's 0 and sometimes it's a lot, right? But
Yeah.
we kept practicing reading the situations. Like that was like all we were practicing and all we did in official games online for like 6 months before we got our shot at tier 1. It was just like reading the game. How much space can I take? And then based on how much space you can take, if everyone is like taking space, then you also get a lot of information on the map. So you can figure out, okay, there's probably 2 guys towards my side of the map, or there's like 0 pressure towards my side of the map. And then like everyone sharing that information to each other gives an idea about how the cities are positioned. And then based off of that information, now we'll decide what we're going to do. And that is a style of play that has a very high ceiling. So you could see us beating some of the best teams in the world, but it also has a very low floor because it is so dependent on everyone showing up on the day, communicating, processing information that's given to them. And if you have a bad day, then it's so hard to play like this. So you also saw us online, even when we were like ranked 9 in the world or whatever, you saw us lose to number 60 or something online because we didn't like set ourselves up proper for the games and, all that kind of stuff, right? So it was a very like volatile play style in that sense, where if you play more, hey, okay, so we take space here first as 3. If we get the space, then we do this. If we don't get the space, then we do this. That's like a play style that definitely top teams play as well, and it's a style where players don't have to focus about too much else other than like clicking hits, playing the round. It's there's way less emphasis put on each player to like be cerebral and process everything going on around him, right? He can just kind of do his job, and that has like a higher floor, than the other way of playing, and a lower ceiling in my opinion. But it should be more consistent. And then of course there's teams that kind of mix and match, and there's like this is very simplistic setup, right? And there's of course like different ways of doing the different things and mixing play styles and all that kind of stuff, right? But
Yeah.
to explain a little bit simplistically, I would say that's like the difference in how we viewed the game Copenhagen Flames and how a lot of other teams view it, and also some of the people that I work with.
Okay, so then, as you were saying, with like Copenhagen Flames, very low floor, high ceiling. EG, as you were saying, like medium, but then also like medium. Do you find that like in this potential next team, you want to like bring them 2 together to make like high ceiling, maybe not middle floor, but like at least like not like a low floor?
Yeah. I definitely think like ultimately, if you wanted to build like a super Counter-Strike team, I think you need a little bit of both, right? And
Yeah.
towards the end, Copenhagen Flames, we were also discussing, okay, can we have some rounds, some strats that we can run when we aren't playing great? So, because we identified that it's an issue with our playstyle that if we aren't on point, we can lose to anyone. So let's try to work on getting some rounds in that we just feel comfortable with. Everyone knows what we're supposed to do, and then we just play that, right? Because those can be nice. It's also like, what if you're like nervous on LAN or whatever, then it can also be nice to just have a round that's super easy and you just know what you're supposed to do, and there's not as much pressure on you to perform necessarily. So I do personally prefer, if I could build a team around any type of player, I prefer playing the Copenhagen Flames style a little bit more, a little bit more cerebral, whatever you want to say, like trying to outsmart your opponents in the rounds. I find that super rewarding to try and play like that.
Yeah.
But it also requires a special type of players, and requires a lot of them, because you need players again that like thrive in taking a lot of individual decisions, playing their positions, that are smart at understanding all the small signals that are being sent throughout the round and can like relay information and absorb information. So it's hard to build a team like that, honestly. But I'm also open to playing in different ways. I think a great example, for example, of a team that, and it might sound like I'm shitting on other teams because I'm saying they don't play like a smart Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, you can also just like, what is smart Counter-Strike? That's the Counter-Strike that wins the most rounds, right? And some of these other teams that are playing more direct Counter-Strike that maybe isn't like 2000 IQ, but it's just like simple, effective. I mean, if you're winning, then that's smart, So I don't view it as like a lesser way of playing Counter-Strike. But I think a team like ENS, for example, have been extremely smart about how they like build their roster. Because to me, ENS play a lot of like somewhat set rounds and like somewhat fast rounds. They know what they want to do. But they have just recruited players that if you tell them, and I'm not saying the players are dumb or anything, but I'm just saying that like those players are like some of the best players at like running in, getting frags, hitting their shots. Like put them in situations where you just know they'll have pretty good duels and they'll probably win those duels, like got like Nerds, Madden, Dusha, like all these guys are just like, it makes perfect sense. And they've like recruited players that are great at this. So that's also really smart to like have a play style, have a philosophy, recruit players that make sense in that philosophy and that play style, and then they'll shine, So, and I'd definitely also be open to doing that. I think the most important thing for me in the next team is just that the philosophy matches the players that are going to be recruited, and again, like just have a composition that like makes sense. So the way the IGL wants to play, the players and like the IGL coach combo, I guess, how they want to play, like the players just make sense together around that. And I think that's the most important to me in the next project.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And then, so you have said that you've been made more versatile as a coach, and talking about all these like structures, would it be like the case that because you've had to open your eyes to newer structures with EG, that is what has made you more versatile? Or is there something else that maybe haven't talked about that is more like the reason why you've expanded and like you've added to your like quiver almost?
No, like I think it is being exposed to like Nealon's way of thinking, Automatic's way of thinking. Also, even like refrezh brought up a lot of thoughts in the short period he's been here. And then again, as I said, having to like watch a lot of teams a lot more about like, okay, so how did they get the wins on the board? How did they win rounds? I spent a lot more time doing that in EG because we were struggling to find success, and just like identifying other teams' play styles as well. Then I think like all those things combined is like what opened my mind up to more different ways of playing Counter-Strike.
Yeah, completely. And so something you did mention, I think at the very start, was something about the like whole thing of doing badly does make you better because it makes you forced to look at your like mistakes. So do you find like this was the case in EG? If you maybe had like a little bit more time and not the 5-day practice days, but like where you because you guys were losing, it actually did accelerate your guys' improvement.
Yeah, it's like in EG, and I know, I mean, a lot of people are already giving me shit for this statement I've said publicly, but like internally, it felt like we got close in EG because we played the first 3 months. We did lose a lot, and I think we learned a lot. We spent a ton of time in the off season just talking about the game, setting up a more like clear direction of how we wanted to play, because we like identified that is what made sense for our team to do, where we maybe tried to play a little bit more loose. Like my perspective was the Copenhagen Flames way. Nealon maybe also came from a team where it was fine to not call with like less direction, and he had a lot of players that just like wanted to go for kills, and we had less of that in EG. So we spent a lot of time like setting up the direction and like a team philosophy that we wanted to really apply. We had like 10 days of practice before the first game's play. This was like the last groups where we played against Heroic in the first game, and practice looked really good. and it felt good, it felt organized. But then I feel like, and maybe some of the players would disagree, but at least to me, it felt like we just succumbed to the pressure and we started playing completely different than what we had done in practice. And then you get into a little bit of a negative spiral, and then to me, like, we did improve a lot. Like, it's internally, I would say all 5, 6, even the other people in EG management like watch practices and etc. Right, like we became so much better as a team, but we were just unable to like translate that into official games. And then as that keeps happening, let's say like Blast, of course, like we had a good game against Heroic to begin with, but then I would say the rest of the games were poor in terms of like translating what we did in practice to officials. Then again, we went like straight into I think we traveled to North America straight after Blast groups, and then we played like 24 hours after landing. We played the online qualifiers for the RMR or something. And then, no, we went straight to Katowice. That's what we did. We had 2 days of practice. We went to Katowice. We played Katowice. Same thing happened. We still felt like we didn't play our game. It got a little bit better, though. It did get a little bit better, but we didn't show the full capabilities. We played and had like one practice day, played an online tournament, lost in that. Again, same issue. We went back to North America on a plane the day after.
Yeah. I'm looking. I casted that game. Yeah.
And then after like 24 hours of landing, we played the online qualifiers for the RMR. We lost those. We traveled back to Malta within 24 hours of losing that game, and we played EPL. At this point in time, the mental of the team was completely destroyed. And I didn't get us back on track. So it is like such a weird feeling to sit with after those, like, I mean, it was only like 2.5 months or something, but that's like essentially what like just like ended the team in a sense. But it was like, it felt like we had found out what we were supposed to do, and we were so, I mean, I gave an interview as well that where I said like this is going to be the best season EG's had in a while, which was like kind of a joke based off the fact that we only had shit seasons. And kind of just like a way of saying like practice has been going really well. We spent so much time. We're finally getting on the same page. Like, we're playing good Counter-Strike. We know what we're doing. But then obviously we were just completely unable to translate that into official games. And then it's just like one tournament into the next tournament, and it just got worse and worse and worse in terms of confidence and you know, everyone believing that you can win the next game. And obviously that's on me for failing to turning the ship around and getting like instill that confidence in the team again. But yeah, we just weren't able to. And then because of that, those 2.5 months, we just stopped playing because the entire roster is being evaluated. And then that's when we bring in refrezh, and we start practicing a little bit of refrezh and high ping. Then we get told we go to the RMR anyway. And then we bring in Hex, even though we haven't practiced with him again. And, you know, then we had practice for like 7 days. So we go into the RMR, we had not practiced for 3.5 weeks, basically, because we didn't think we were playing in the RMR, right? But then again, I think the whole part of time where we had refrezh was like no one could have performed well under those circumstances. So yeah, it is what it is.
That sounds awful. Like, I'm looking at the dates, and I don't think I realized, like, now I'm actually like piecing together the like, okay, that was in Europe, this is America, that was in Europe, and this is America. It's like that's one-way street to burnout. No, like that cannot be healthy. Like, you remove everything as a player, like, surely, maybe even as yourself, like, does that not affect like how you just process as a human?
I mean, it definitely, I would say, especially when you're losing, it's so much easier to burn out when you're losing. So that makes everything so much tougher. But yeah, so like, for example, that EPL was so tough. The EPL we had to start this season, because one thing is that we had traveled to North America and back to Europe. I think it was within a week. I don't have the dates in front of me, but it was also the fact that we within 24 hours of landing, I think it was like 16 hours after we landed in North America, we played the online qualifier, and then within maybe like 32 hours or something of landing back in Europe, we were playing in EPL. And again, it's like losing, and we didn't have any practice days, because again, like, we were traveling and then landing and then boom, you're playing your official game, right? It's not optimal either, just like not even taking into burnout into consideration, but it's like it's not optimal not to play for 2 days going into an official game. Like preferably you want to like be in a groove, but obviously that's impossible if you land right before you're playing the game. And traveling from Europe to North America, that, because again, like some of the airports we need to travel from, for example, like Katowice airport, like there's no direct flights from Katowice to where the players live in North America. So
Yeah.
you have like a 24-hour travel day ahead of you or whatever, right? And then of course you land, and then you play, and then again from where they live, we need to go to Malta. Malta doesn't have direct flights to North America, whatever. Again, so you have like a 24-hour travel day, and then you have to play an EPL, right? So, and if you're winning, it's way easier to deal with. But when you're losing on top of it, again, as I said, our mental for that EPL was completely destroyed, both from burnout and jet lag, and the players were up, like waking up at random hours of the night and stuff like that while we were in Malta. But again, you're also just losing, and we just missed the RMR, which is ridiculous and embarrassing, But again, we had like 36 hours to reset, and then you have to play. You need to go in, but again, we were unable to do so. It was rough. It was tough. And I really want to like give a shout out to all the guys, because even though I am saying our mental was broken, it was in terms of like the confidence. But I honestly still like enjoyed every trip we went on, every land we went to. Like we were laughing, we were smiling, we were trying our best. People were like, making jokes and like keeping it light and still enjoying each other's company. So I feel like on a lot of other teams, it would have been miserable to even just exist. So yeah, I really still enjoyed the time I got to spend with all the guys.
Yeah. It's even like when on the other teams they're winning, it's bad. So like let alone losing. But okay, so like as maybe as like hard as it is for you to like say to like almost say like yes, this was correct, but like do you think it was the right idea then for EG basically just to like nuke the project and upgrade the whole of the tier 2, like the like second team? And like do you think that like because they've got the time now, they can actually practice, they've got the player break, do you think they'll actually surprise quite a lot of people when they go into like Blast and Cologne? You guys think it'll be Cologne, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think they'll be at Cologne, but they'll have EPL as well.
Okay. But Blast is like very soon as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Blast is very soon. I mean, I think it depends about like the goals of the organization, right? I feel like if they want to be a top 10 team in the world, then I have a hard time seeing the roster they have now doing so. But obviously the roster they have now, like I do think the roster now makes sense. It makes sense in terms of, I mean, I don't know their contracts, but I'm guessing it's a cheaper option than some other options, right? And on top of that, they are staying in North America, so they're still like supporting the North American ecosystem, obviously gaining respect and admiration from the North American fans, especially at a time where Liquid is also going to Europe. There's it makes even more sense to be like the North American team, right? They can battle with complexity for that title probably. It's also a roster that, again, like you have 10 practice days roughly in the end of the player break before you go into Blast. So getting a team that already have played together for a long time, they already have like a way they want to approach the game, they already have strats, they have a map pool, all that kind of stuff, right? That also makes sense in terms of performing short term. But I mean, I think our roster probably did need like somewhat of a nuke or changes or whatever, right? But I feel like we did have some pieces that made sense, and I think if you wanted to be like top 10 in the world or whatever, upgrading the roster that we already had, I think would have made more sense. If you wanted to hit top 10 short term, I think so. Balance would also agree with that, and at least for all the rosters, I also think Balance said so, and it does to the US article that, I mean, they did look at if it was possible to create like a team that could be a top tier contender from day one. But when that didn't fall into place, then they promoted the EG Black roster, which to me makes total sense. Like it makes sense to me that either you go like all in and you build a world-class team of world-class players, and if that doesn't happen, then like why be a mediocre half European team or something? It makes sense just to go with the EG Black roster.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just kind of like a last thing about EG and like North America in general. I want to get your take on NA losing the Legends spot. And a lot of people like I think Launders literally said it. He was like, "This is the worst thing ever to happen in NACS." And like, do you agree with this, or like, what are your thoughts in general on the matter?
I mean, it definitely makes it rough. Or just the Americas in general is down to 0 legend spots and only 4 spots at the major. And you have Furia, Complexity, Pain, EG, Imperial, MIBR. There's some other North American projects that might be. I mean, there's a lot of free agents. We'll see if they get collected on a team. I think you have players out there now like Swisher, Rush, Breeze. Like we'll see if some of them will come together in some kind of team, And I think the Zero Nation lineup as well. I mean, there's like probably like 8 teams that feel like they should be making the major, and they'll be very disappointed if they don't make the major. There's only 4 slots, so that's gonna be a tough one. I mean, there's only gonna be 4 slots in the RMR. 8 spots in the entire RMR.
What?
And no team. Yeah, because the entire RMR format is changed when you only have 4 slots. So they're gonna have the same RMR system as the Asian region.
Yeah.
So they'll have 8 teams. No one's qualified. So you have to go through open qualifiers with only 8 slots available. And again, like there are more than 8 I know teams make fun of the Americas region, but there's more than 8 competitive.
Yeah, definitely.
To win a best of 1. Like even if your name is Furia, there's more than 8 teams that you can lose a best of 1 to. And they're going to have to go through these open qualifiers for those 8 slots in the RMR. So it's like, it's incredible. It's going to be incredibly difficult. It might mean like upsets. It's, I mean, and obviously only having 4 slots just makes it so much harder to earn slots back. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not good for the region. And a shame that I think, I'm not sure about EG's plans, but from what I know, Liquid obviously going to spend like all their time in Europe now. Complexity is going to spend all their time in Europe from what I'm hearing. I think EG will probably do the same. So also just like the practice the North American teams can get is just going to be minuscule moving forward. So I definitely think it's a very rough spot the North American scene is being put in.
Yeah. Okay, so you were talking there just about practice especially, and I feel like this something gets talked about a lot, but I think you have a very unique perspective with the fact that you've seen firsthand top tier EU and firsthand top tier NA for like quite a long time. What are maybe some of, for you, like the differences that you might find that's like why EU is better?
I mean, there's just so many more teams in Europe.
Is that
I mean that is just like it's such a like it sounds so like kind of whatever, I guess, but it's just like if we want to practice Mirage and Ancient one day, let's say, right? It's difficult for me to find another team that wants to also play Mirage today. So it's kind of hard to just like completely low like just the logistics of it, right? Where in Europe it's like, okay, I can play against a pretty good team on Mirage any day. Like it just matters that there will be a good team that wants to play Mirage against us. But here it's like, okay, Liquid might not be North American, Complexity might not be North America. All the Brazilian teams are probably not there. So then we have like EG Black we could practice against. You have maybe like ATK or Nouns, but then like they're playing like the ECL a lot of the days, like so they are playing their leagues, their tournaments that we can't participate in. So we can't play against them because they have match days all the time. So then we have to play against like we're playing against ESEA advanced teams in North America a lot of our times and days, and a lot of these teams they're still in school, so they don't start practicing until like 5 p.m. And normally in Europe we can start our practice at noon or something, So it's also just like a completely different schedule. Yeah, it's hard to get the amount of practices in you want. It's hard to get the maps you want. It's hard to like plan ahead of time. Like I would literally have to put in our calendar like, okay, we meet up at this time, probably, and then I expect us to be done around this time. But I have no idea who we're playing or what maps we're playing because we have to play like amateur teams because ECL is going on, the other teams are abroad for European tournaments, or they're boot camping in Europe or something. So, and non-professional teams, they don't like look for practices like 7 days ahead. They're looking for practice like, oh, hey, you guys want to, like, can you practice tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like we wouldn't be able to like plan our day more than like 24 hours ahead. So just like completely, just the logistics is just so much more difficult. Where in Europe, I just have everything booked like 5-6 days in advance. We know what maps, we know what time, we know what opponent, like, so players can also prepare way better, and so, and again, better. We're just playing against better opponents. Like we even had practices against ESEA Main teams in North America. That we were just like forced to play.
So, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's like that's really rough. Like that, I didn't realize it was like that bad. Like it's like stooping down to like that low. Like, what do you even learn from that? Like, do you learn anything?
I mean, it's all about like you have to be, because obviously we would win those practices.
Yeah.
So it's about like, hey, like, did it feel good the way we won? Did we do the things we had agreed on? So it's like bringing up rounds that you like win easy, but then be like, hey, if we're against a good team here, like, do we like the way we're positioned? But there's also some practices that's just like, played against a team, we were playing Noob CT. I think they just rushed inner like 11 rounds in a row. So it's like, okay, I guess we hold inner better against rushes, but outside of that, it's completely like we were talking about. We were trying to work on like how to rotate on a map like Nuke, but they just never smoked outside in yard. So we never had to like rotate. So yeah, it was waste of an hour basically.
Yeah, that's like that's stuff that would get you banned from prep groups in Europe just doing that alone. Yeah. So speaking a little bit about Europe as well. Obviously, an organization that you have quite close roots to, as we've spoken about, Copenhagen Flames, they've closed their doors, which was a massive shock to, I think, everyone. And it was really sad to see like that team as well go, considering how well they were doing. And I just want to ask you, like, what do you feel like that might have on the impact of like the Danish team in particular? And then also, like, do you feel like this might be a hard spell for CS teams? Because like they were winning tournaments. And if they were winning tournaments and still can't keep afloat, it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it all over esports right now. You've seen entire organizations close down. Copenhagen Flames, Tricks, the Guard, I think they're called in North America. That was a pretty big organization too.
Star.
Yeah, you see organizations where like they're like mass firings. Exodus is like, I believe like 100 Thieves has fired a bunch of people. There's a lot of organizations that fired a bunch of people. And I also think you're also seeing Counter-Strike like academy projects being closed down. EG, I don't know how much that plays into it, but I mean, it is also a cost cut in promoting the academy team, right? There's like rumors about Fnatic looking at like way cheaper players moving forward than what they've been targeting previously, and in general, you just don't see that many players being bought out of contracts right now because money is tight. So I do think that is just the reality right now in the esports scene. I do think that we'll see how it develops. I don't think it's like disastrous for esports. I don't think we should be worried about if esports is here or not. I think like 4 years ago, we also saw like a lot of people being fired. To me, it kind of like goes in waves a little bit.
Yeah.
Investors get a little too excited. They post a little bit too much money in. Then they have to reel it back in. Then things start looking good again. Some investors will post in money and they'll compete for who can spend the most money. And then, it's going to happen a couple of times. But also just like emerging markets, it is normal that like there's a huge potential in esports. There's a ton of people watching. No one has really figured out how to like monetize that yet. Like organizations aren't making money. Most are losing money. Only a few are like turning minor profits. But in a market like that, there's going to be people out there that are willing to take big risks to try and be number one. People are trying to be number one in the world for when like Coca-Cola comes in and, like whoever, right? Like all these big sponsorships. And then like you want to be number one when that happens, because then they'll look at you. So people are willing to risk investing a lot of money into this because there is a potential upside. But when there's risk involved, obviously once in a while, people will fail. Like not everyone can succeed. So we have a ton of people, ton of organizations, ton of teams, ton of clubs that are risking things right now by running with a deficit every year, running based off of investor money, and they can't all reach their goals. Because I promise you, like right now, there's 20 teams, 20 organizations in the world that all have the goal they need to be a top 5 team within 2 years. And obviously 20 teams can't be a top 5 team. Only 5 can be a top 5 team. So at the same time, so many people they have these revenue targets. They need to get these big sponsors. 20 teams out there are trying to convince Coca-Cola to sponsor them. They'll probably only, sponsor one of them or whatever, right? So it's like some will fail, and that sharpens competitions, but that also just means that the organizations that live and prevail, they're probably going to be the ones that, give the best product to fans, drive their business in the best way, provide players with, whatever the most stable contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So like, to me, that's just the way it goes in like emerging markets. There's going to be a lot of people throwing their head in the ring, and not everyone's going to make it. So I don't feel like too alarmed by any of it.
Yeah, because I think an issue you raised there about teams, like, 20 teams setting their goals top 5. I feel like it's a really common theme I see with, like, players talking to them. They're like, oh, like, this team wants us to be this. It's like, we're not a top 50 team. We're a top 80 or top 100 team, and they only want a top 50 team. It's like, there's only so many top 50 teams you can get type thing. But, yeah, so because you touched on the point there of teams making risks to get that number 1 spot. Looking at this roster mania that has been dubbed that we've had recently, a lot of teams have had some wild and wacky rosters. Do you feel like this is them trying to do something different and risky to get number 1?
I actually don't know. Actually, I think a lot of the teams, at least obviously not everything has been like confirmed, but for example, like Vitality, I think it's public knowledge that Flames was a free agent, so that was a relatively cheap acquisition. There's of course risk involved with like changing players, right? But it was a relatively cheap acquisition, right? They didn't have to like break the bank to make it happen. I think every team in like top 15 almost try to get Flames outside of the national teams maybe, but Vitality won. I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think on T there's some adjustments they need to make, but I think Spinks can do the roles to Pre did, but easily. But overall, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to make the change. Even though I do have a ton of respect for Dupree, I do also think Flames is like really good. I think the other big changes, right, is like Navi, but as far as we hear, that wasn't like on Navi to make those changes. And again, like Navi, I don't know exactly like how much they've paid to get like IM, if that's something that's gonna happen. I don't know how much they will have to spend to get JL. As far as I also just read, I don't like know this for a fact, but I read that JL didn't have a lot of time left on his contract, and Acor said publicly what the salaries were in Game Legion, and they were pretty damn low. So I'm guessing buyouts are also pretty damn low. So that's not like to me that's not like a huge moves or like ton of risk. To me, that's actually like a sign of organizations not being willing to risk as much anymore. And in Cloud9, as far as we see publicly, again, I don't have any inside information on this, but apparently Electronic and Perfecto like benched themselves, wanted to leave or whatever. So if they're joining Cloud9, potentially that was an expensive deal, might have been a cheaper deal just from the fact that you're in a better position to negotiate buying players if they like bench themselves and say, hey, I don't want to play for your team then, because then you're kind of forced to just take whatever you can get, kind of. So I don't know if there's like, also as far as I know, like Mouse getting Shui, as far as I know, they actually still owned him. He was just like on a loan to Gamer Legion, so that's not like a big move or anything like that. Liquid bring in Patsy, but he was also already like benched for like a month and a half or something. And Spirit Rainwaker is not like a huge transfer. So I actually feel like when I look at these, like there's a lot of weird moves, but to me these are like we're not getting the blockbuster moves because no one's willing to spend, right? Like you don't see like for example when G2 bought m0NESY for X $100,000, right? Like we're seeing this less and less right now. That's at least like my take on it.
Yeah, no, that actually I never saw it in that way. Now I do. It seems so logical in a sense, really. Like it's like a wacky but safe move in the sense because like, you're not losing anything really. Like, you're improving, but it is like it's a weird move maybe on the outside, but you're actually improving something. But
I feel like a lot of teams looked for those like low cost moves that would
yeah,
make them whole.
yeah, because that's Ents. Like I remember, like they sold
Yeah.
like towards they sold for loads and then brought in like a Nertz and a Sampaias for not that much. Just when I am Dallas, it kind of works out. Like it looks weird. You're like, how is this going to work? So you look at the roster, you're like, that's so random. It works. But coming towards the end, so just looking at like what is next for you, like you had a manner of building a team throughout your whole career, and it seems like it's something you're very excel at. So is this something you're looking to do? Have you had any offers? Would be like build a team, or would you be looking to slot into like a tier 1 team that's already been built?
I mean, I'm open to a lot of different things. I could also see myself not even coaching.
Okay.
I do feel like I have unfinished business, so I do have a slight preference towards coaching because I really want to prove myself. I feel like rightfully so, a lot of people are questioning whether or not I'm a good coach. I don't like. I think it's okay that people question that right now, but I would really like to prove that to myself, especially. But it needs to be the right project too. I'm down to build a team, a roster. I'm down to join a team too, but it's definitely for me. It needs to be a place that has resources, ambitions to play in tier 1 and play the big tournaments. Don't necessarily need to be there right now, but there needs to be that ambition and the resources and stuff like that. I can join a team that's already 5 together, but I would prefer to be in a place where I'm being listened to in terms of like roster compositions, moving forward, stuff like that, because I do feel like I have a lot to add. Um, but yeah, I mean, I could also see myself going back to like a GM kind of role that I've had before. I've even considered being like a player agent. I've always I think a lot of people know from Copenhagen Flames, even if I was on the like organization side of things, we were big on making sure players felt good and felt protected and had a home, stuff like that. So that's always been like a thing at the back of my mind. So I have a little bit of freedom. I don't feel like I'm in a rush or anything. So it's just about like finding a good fit, something I'm excited about. The most important thing to me is just like waking up every day and feeling challenged. So I just need to find somewhere where I can have that feeling. Then I'll be happy.
Yeah, well, that sounds really good to hear, and I really hope I can see you back in the server technically very soon. And well, Vobo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been such an insightful interview, and I feel like for me personally, it's cleared up like so many unknowns almost about so many different conversations. So I hope you have enjoyed as well, and thank you so much for coming on. And also, thank you very much, everyone, for watching another episode of In the Crosshair, and make sure to stay tuned next week for another episode.